Good evening. Welcome to part 2 of Bedtime Stories. 10 years had elapsed since Claude Etienne left his wife and stillborn son's bodies to grow cold on their deathbed. Every second, every minute, and every hour of each day since was a living hell for the people enslaved on Magnolia Hill. It was particularly difficult for Sorrow and her daughter, whom she named Flossie. Old Mother Ethel was long gone, dead and buried, feeding the worms in the old slave cemetery that bordered the woods behind the plantation. Sorrow was now the plantation cook, midwife, and healer. Sorrow and her daughter Flossie could have continued to live in the kitchen as they had while Mother Ethel was alive, but Sorrow didn't want to be that close to the white folks in the big house. She preferred to live on Slave Row. Besides, folks were running in and out of the kitchen all day and night. Sorrow needed privacy for some of the things that she was doing. Flossie was dark, like her daddy. She had to be made of good use if Sorrow wanted to keep her only child out of the fields. Folks didn't last long in the fields. Fact of the matter is, folks didn't last long, period, on Magnolia Hill. So Sorrow passed on her vast store of knowledge about healing, herbs, and delivering babies to her daughter Flossie so that she would be more valuable to the whites. She also passed on her knowledge about the Orisha gods and goddesses to her daughter. It had been more than 10 years since they killed Sorrow's man, and still the hatred that festered like an open sore was blazing as white hot as the fires of hell. She was consumed by it. Sorrow found a small sense of satisfaction every single day she sprinkled some of her poisonous herbs in the Etienne's food before serving it. Slow and easy. That's how you do it. She wanted to see them suffer. It was daybreak, and the sun framed the plantation like a beautiful water-colored painting. Cletement and his son Claude sat side by side astride their massive horses, from a vantage point that allowed them to take in the verdant vista that was Magnolia Hill. They never traveled alone. Nameless, a minor level malevolent spirit from the third level of hell, hovered over Clement Etienne like the stink on a rotting corpse. And nothing, yet another demon, clawed the inside of Claude's frayed soul, making him restless and anxious to be about evil. The pride and avarice oozing from their black-hearted souls fed a basic need for the spirit's existence. They grew stronger with every day their host drew breath. And now the demons were nigh on invincible. Soon, very soon, the demons and not the host would control their steps. And then the lowly demons would be able to petition the Satan for a promotion. In the meantime, the hosts were doing a fine and dandy job on their own at being deliciously wicked. Nameless sent a telepathic message to the demon inside Claude. Then it rubbed its hands together in anticipation of some fun. It whispered in Clement's ears. "It's killing time, boss." Nameless laughed when Clement jerked in the saddle. He just tickled Clement's manhood as a little treat for being a really bad boy. Then Clement and his son Claude spurred their sweaty horses like two wild Mohicans on the warpath. They viciously whipped the sides of the winded beast as they rode hell-bent for leather through the gates of Magnolia Hill. They'd been out all night drinking and whoring. Now they were out for blood, and they knew just where to find it. They veered their horses in the direction of the slave quarters. "There's back, Flossie," Sorrow hissed. "Go hide yourself in the woods behind the patch of hemlock till I give you the signal to come out. Go on now, hurry." The love in Sorrow's eyes softened her scar-ravaged face. Flossie hurried to do her mother's bidding. Sorrow had practiced the drill with her daughter many times over. It became necessary when she noticed Master Claude sniffing around her daughter like an old randy hound dog with a devil riding its back. The pounding of Master and young Master's horses' hooves sounded like a death knell, generating fear in the hearts of every slave in the quarter. This wouldn't be the first time the Etienne swooped down on the slaves like hungry vultures on wild game, nor would it be the last. The sound drew nearer and louder as the woods behind Sorrel's cabin swallowed her daughter. It wouldn't be long before the double dose of evil was right there, kicking in or pounding on somebody's cabin door. Sorrel expelled a sigh of relief she hadn't even realized she'd been holding when they rode right past her cabin, kicking up dust and dirt in their wake. Sorrel thought, praise be to God, this time it ain't my door they are darkening. Some other poor wretch would have to service her father and her half-brother's twisted need this morning. The two large stallions reared up on their spindly hind legs. They were whinnying in pain from being ridden too hard, and from the rider's crop the Etiennes wielded like madmen. Cleta and Claude tethered their horses 2 doors down, in front of young Sylvie and her little boy Isaac's cabin. It wasn't long before Sylvie's cries for mercy were heard the length and breadth of Slave Row. Sorrow covered her ears and closed her eyes to drown out the sound of fists connecting with flesh and grunts of pain. But the sounds kept on coming, traveling through the thin walls of her cabin to invade the space in her mind. Sylvie and little Isaac's cries were eating her alive. I can't take this much longer. Abatala, deliver me from these feelings. They will only lead to my destruction and to the destruction of that one thing you have allowed me to love, my daughter. And then she heard it, the too familiar gut-wrenching sound of a wounded animal scrape the surface of her soul with his jagged fingernails with each of Sylvie's piteous wails. After that, there was a silence more frightening than even the screams had been. A terrible sense of foreboding dropped over Slave Row like a damp blanket covered with mold. Sorrow hastened to the place where she hid her ileki, the multicolored beads she prayed with. She was an Orisha priestess, an Obeah conjure woman. Tonight she would stand before the hidden altar in the woods and lead her followers in prayer for the destruction of the whites. But today she would pray to the gods alone. Sorrow closed her eyes to pray. O Ludamere, I beseech you, smite Cledemat Etienne. Render him unable to walk, talk, eat, or sleep. Then, mighty O Ludamere, I ask you to smother the life out of him, nice and slow. I want him to struggle for each breath to suffer. Then make him die hard and burn in the sewers of hell for eternity. There has to be a special place in hell reserved for that foul demon spawn Claude, she thought. Sorrow asked the gods to instill him with a sense of fear such as he'd never known. She wanted him to experience the same fear he made every slave on Magnolia Hill feel every single day of their miserable lives. Nothing short of Claude's death could drown out the sounds of him panting and grunting on top of her and the wet mongrel smell that followed him even after he bathed. I claim in your mighty name, O Ludamere, and in the names of Ilegua, Abatala, Oshun, Oya, Yemaya, and Shengo, every god in the pantheon, that there will always be discord in the Etienne household, and that Claude Etienne's son Julien and Henri will always be at odds with one another, and that they will know nothing but suffering all the days of their lives. Stamp out their seed, mighty ones, so that the Etienne line will be no more. Tears ran down Sorrel's face, and her chest was heaving with emotion. She was so absorbed in her vengeful prayers and clutching the ileke with such fervor it broke apart in her hands. The sound of the beads hitting the dirt floor snapped her out of the spiritual trance she was in. She opened her eyes, and Cledemat Etienne was standing in the open doorway. Sorrow won't know sorrow no more. Thank you again for allowing me to read an excerpt from my first novel entitled The Bliss of the Grave. My name is C. Evelyn-Holland. Thank you and good night.